All right. So the guy responsible for what we would consider the short story, Washington Irving, is an interesting kind of guy. And you've all probably heard of him, whether you know his name or not, because he is famous for The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Rip Van Winkle, and he actually is the first to give the name of New York City the nickname Gotham. And you all are all familiar with Gotham in the Batman comics and things like that. So he is prolific in establishing what we consider to be kind of our own Americana tradition. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But um, Washington Irving, he was born in 1783 in New York City. And at the time of his birth, the American Revolution was just ending. He spent a lot of his career traveling in Europe, and he wrote. One of his first jobs was as a newspaper journalist, and he was a reporter um, for the Morning Chronicle, and he actually covered the Aaron Burr trial for treason. But he traveled widely across Europe. But when he returned, he published the sketchbook of Geoffrey Canyon, and it was a collection of stories of his, including his best known works, Rip Van Winkle and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And these stories are the first examples of the genre of the short story. And it really marks a milestone in American literary history because it was the first piece of American writing to garner European recognition. It's the first kind of it's noteworthy because of its inaugural use of strictly American settings. He discusses American concerns like the loss of tradition, the American dream. And like I said, he does those in his two kind of collective pieces. One, he gives us a history of New York, where he has an imaginary narrator of Diedrich Knickerbocker. And these are kind of fantasy stories that become a part of American folklore. Think about that, guys. It's American folklore. And if you are familiar with the New York Knicks or anything like that, this is the guy responsible for creating that. So, um, in the sketchbook of Geoffrey Canyon, he also creates a collection of short stories that were influenced by German folk tales, but he gives them a strictly American spin. So, um, Washington Irving, he dies of a heart attack in November of 1859, but he really leaves behind a legacy. And I want to read to you guys something that literary scholar Fred Lewis Patty says of Irving's contributions, in that he says that, quote, Irving made short fiction popular, stripped the prose tale of its didactic elements, and made it a literary form solely for entertainment, added richness of atmosphere and unity of tone, added definite locality and actual American scenery and people, brought a peculiar nicety of execution and patient workmanship, added humor and lightness of touch, was original, created characters who are always definite individuals, and endowed the short story with a style that is finished and beautiful. So again, like I said, without Washington Irving, we would have no short story, and we wouldn't have a lot of the things that make us unique as a literary American literature. So, um, I do want to talk very quickly about The Devil and Tom Walker, but I'm going to stop here so you guys can, so that I don't have an incredibly long video. So I'm going to stop here and pick up with the actual background for the story that we are reading for this week.